I think this is pretty much a friendly audience, so to speak, but those who may not know it, the history of Rhino Ark, it was started in 1988 by a visionary engineer and rather dynamic character, Ken Cool, to save the dwindling black rhino population and reduce human-wildlife conflict in the Aberdare ecosystem. Our first intervention was in the Eastern Salient, as it's called, where an initial 38-kilometre game-proof electric fence was built. As many of you will know, this proved exceptionally effective, and the novel approach was adopted as a model for natural forest conservation and human-wildlife conflict management. Over the following decades, the 400-kilometre-long Aberdare's fence was built and finished in 2010, and so far 380 kilometres of a fence which will eventually go right the way around Mount Kenya has been completed. All the fences built also have to be maintained and looked after as required. Many other projects have been developed alongside the original fences, some of which have been shown on our reel on the screens and will be touched on later. Rhino Ark has become and remains a respected and effective NGO working in cooperation with everyone from the Kenya Wildlife Service and the Kenya Forestry Service to local villagers and international charities. We are very pleased to see that we have actually got 3 of the Cool family here, 2 of Ken Cool's sons and 1 grandson. There are more, I gather. Oh, two grandsons here. I beg your pardon. Right, it's getting better, I think. I'm sure that Ken will be delighted to know that a new sanctuary for the black rhino is being planned in the eastern salient of the Aberdares, and this will be the first mountain forest rhino sanctuary in Kenya and is being organised by Rhino Ark in conjunction with the KWS and the KFS. Rhino Ark UK and Rhino Ark Kenya are working together to increase awareness of the many and varied ways in which Rhino Ark works in Kenya, some of which Lucy was able to see when she visited the projects there in 2023. Now, I know that you've come here to listen to Lucy and Alex, so the last thing I want to point out is that we have a UK Rhino Challenge bike event on the 4th of May, and there are leaflets lying around for that, and we can get you involved in that next. Now, I'd like you to introduce you to Alex Bescoby, who will be leading the conversation with Lucy this evening. Alex is an award-winning filmmaker, author and presenter with broadcasts on Channel 4, History, BBC, Discovery and more. With his filmmaking team at Grammar Productions, he loves travel, history and sharing stories from remote places. He's worked with like-minded brands and institutions across 5 continents, including Jaguar Land Rover, the British Museum and the Halo Trust. He's a trustee of Help for Forgotten Allies, championing the memory of veterans from Southeast Asia who fought for Britain in the Second World War. Alex will now correct anything else that I've got wrong, and he will introduce you to Lucy. Thank you all very much.
Good evening. Thank you, John. Thank you to the Rhino Ark team for pulling this together. It's been amazing to hear about your work and learn everything that you're doing down in East Africa. It's absolutely fascinating. We will be coming on to that in a bit. We are going to take a slight detour through South America before we do. So my name is Alex Bescoby. I am the man that is about to be attacked with a machete, I've just noticed. But tonight we're here really to talk about somebody else. So welcome to the Royal Geographical Society, obviously. If you've not been here before, it's an incredible place. It's one of my favourite buildings in the world. When you round the corner, you see the likes of Livingstone and Scott looking down at you. If you go downstairs into the library, you'll find the letters of Gertrude Bell and Freya Stark and T. Lawrence, and you realise that this country has been exporting mad, bad and brilliant people around the world for centuries. It's something we're incredibly good at. And those people have been going out there into parts unknown, teaching us about things we don't know and bringing lessons back that can enrich us all. And some might say that, that generation is dying, that they don't make them like that anymore. And I think if you would look at the TV schedules, a lot of TV commissioners seem to think that exploration and adventure is Philip Schofield crying on a beach, or Matt Hancock eating the parts of a kangaroo that you shouldn't. But thank God for Channel 4, because they have realized that there is still a brand new generation of true explorers who are doing exploration at its purest. And I'm delighted that we'll be celebrating the career of one of those tonight. But before I invite her up onto the stage, let's just see what she's been up to most recently.
Over 50% of the world's population now live in cities. We are the most disconnected we have ever been from the natural world. With the rapid pace and growth in which us humans live, it would be easy to believe that there's no area left unexplored. But you'd be wrong. There are still majestic pockets of land that are truly rugged, wild, and untouched.
It's just brutal. We just haven't seen proper sunlight in like 21 days. So dark under the canopy.
And the critical thing is, we need them for the health of our planet. I'm Lucy, and I'm an explorer. I've been leading expeditions across the world for over a decade, and now I'm on a mission to take you with me. On my biggest and most dangerous adventure yet, I'm trying to cross one of these last remaining wildernesses located deep in the Amazon rainforest, a journey many think is impossible.
Don't go. If you go, you'll never come back.
I want to show you the beauty,
Oh my God, look at this.
the surprising,
It's magic in here. Truly is magic.
and the downright ugly.
Oh!
With my team, we'll seek out the weird and wonderful creatures that call this unrelenting place home. And as we journey on foot through inhospitable jungle, we'll learn to work with the wild, not against it.
We're very, very far from help right now. If something happens, we are on our own. We just got attacked by the really big wasp.
Because it has never been more important for us to build up our relationship with the natural world and protect these last wildernesses at all costs.
This is the hardest thing I have ever done.
Well, will you please welcome to the stage my fellow of the RGS, one of the brightest sparks of the new generation of British explorers, Lucy Shepherd.
That's what you meant to do.
That's all right. Do you want some? I'll get you some water
Oh,
first.
thank you.
And also now, as of 2023, excuse me, some housekeeping, a global ambassador for Rhino Ark UK, which we will come on to.
Absolutely. No, thank you, everyone, and thank you for having me. Thank you, Rhino Ark, especially, for putting on this evening.
But before we go back to East Africa, let's start out here in Guyana. Obviously, for those who haven't yet seen the show, please go home and watch it tonight after you've had the pleasure of hearing it, the story here first. It's an absolutely brilliant two-parter. I binged it in one evening, and it is both brilliant, terrifying, grisly, and wonderful. So congratulations. How does it feel that it's now finally out?
A relief. Yeah, no, it feels, when it came out, so it came out in October, and it was a long time coming, I think, in terms of, we did the expedition 3 years prior, and the way TV goes, it's not that straightforward, as you well know. But no, the reaction was incredible, and the really good thing about that show, and despite it taking 3 years, it meant that I had utter control over it, so I was able to produce it in exactly the way, which is quite rare to be sort of completely authentic with something.
And it shows, because it's a truly wonderful story. And I said not to talk shop, but I know how hard you worked before the expedition, during the expedition, and then the real expedition started afterwards to get it out to screens.
Yep.
And there's a book coming as well, isn't there?
There is a book coming.
Before we get full plug. But that is to hear the behind-the-scenes story. But it is amazing. I mean, so the journey was in...
So it took place at the end of 2021, and it took place in Guyana, which I'll talk about a little bit more when we get to it. But yeah, the expedition, it had been a long time, sort of 7 years in the making, and it wasn't, I think when I was a kid, I don't know, wait, put your hands up here if you used to climb trees when you were a kid. Okay, most of the room. Now put your hands up if you still climb trees on a regular basis. I see a couple, which is great. But it's funny because everyone sort of says, how do you become an explorer? Is the interesting question. I find that question quite hard to answer because I didn't wake up one morning thinking I was going to be an explorer. Actually, this building has a lot to answer for that. But like a lot of people, I used to climb trees. And there's this age, and I think it happens around 13 years old. And at 13, you start to stop doing these things that you maybe used to like, climbing frames and all those sorts of things. And I don't know what gets in the way. It's like media, caring what people think, peer pressure, all that sort of thing. And then we kind of lose our North Star in a way. And I could really feel that happening at sort of age 13 or something. And I sort of lost identity and started to think, well, how can I get that adventurous spark back? And I sort of just really held on to that, I think. And that's when I sort of heard about something in the paper. It was an expedition that the Royal Geographical Society was behind, and it was an expedition taking 18 to 25-year-olds to Svalbard up in the Arctic.
I think you have a picture of that here.
Yeah,
So this is the first expedition. So obviously we've gone from climbing frames and jazzy trousers to much superior kits. But so tell me about this, because I know this holds a real place in your own history. This is the first big one, right?
I mean, I didn't grow up, despite what people think, I didn't think that being an explorer was a real job. I mean, even now, when I meet people saying that I'm an explorer, it could sound a little bit pretentious. So I get that. And like, what does that actually mean? For now, I use it as an umbrella term. Explorer, keep it simple. Also filmmaker, all these other things. But I grew up absolutely loving the expeditions of, the documentaries on TV.
Yeah.
A lot of those people were very much in the circle of now. And I thought, how on earth can I figure out a way to get there? My parents weren't in the military, they weren't explorers or anything like that, but I'm actually an only child, which unfortunately for them means a lot of worrying, sleepless nights. But I saw an advert in the paper and it was asking for, it was this expedition, and I thought, I'll apply. And back then they were only taking 10 people, and you had to go through interviews, you had to go through training, you had to learn how to fundraise, which I don't have to say into people in this room.
It never ends.
It never ends. You always think you'll get to a point where it will just get easier, and it never does. But yeah, to my surprise, I got in, and at 18, headed off to here for 10 whole weeks with 9 other people, completely trained up. And that was like my, okay, this is that kid climbing the tree, this is that kid again.
And, well, what did you learn from the first big trip? I mean, it's in a cold place. I do not like the cold. So, I mean...
I love the cold.
You may know, from my own work, you'll never see me in the snow.
The cold is so clean and pristine, and everything's just so... Like, if it's a sunny day, like this picture here, and you can't see any polar bears, and you know there's no crevasses and things like that, then it's just bliss. I do love it. And I think I learned... there's this other version of myself that I had lost touch with, and sometimes I think a lot of us lose touch with that self forever, and maybe it's the kid in you, And I always think expeditions, every time I'm going out, it doesn't even have to be an expedition out in the wilderness, it could just be a trip to North Wales or Scotland. It's like, acts like a time capsule for me. I don't know if anyone else gets this, but whenever I'm doing that, you're living in the present. The world is quite a scary place at the moment. Things are moving very, very fast. And it can get, we're in our modern life of screens and worrying about the next day. And these adventures act like, I am the same person I was back then. I am the same person I was as a kid. And it's quite nice about just getting back to that version of yourself. And I also learned that I came back with this huge duty and responsibility for Mother Earth. So what would happen is I felt this deep connection with the world, and got back, and I would get really angry with parents or other people. I'd watch them put on the kettle and then walk away from it, really trivial stuff like that, and I'd be like, think about the bigger picture. And so that was the start of feeling like that. But the other thing that happened was, I'm sure a lot of people in this room have experienced this, you will definitely have experienced this. You could do a big adventure, have a big experience, and everyone, and it is often your loved ones, they say, wow, what an amazing once-in-a-lifetime experience. And then it's just, I actually felt, I think it was like about 6 months or so, I got quite lost after that.
Yeah.
Like, you have this lack of control, and you think, oh, nothing can ever peak that, how can I ever get back to that version? And it wasn't until I came back to here, I did a talk after the Arctic, I was only 18, and I was out in where we were just having drinks, and I'd heard that this person who we were standing next to knew Bear Grylls, and I thought, oh, Bear Grylls.
I still get the giggles around him.
You're telling me.
Here, and we're both,
I met him a few months ago here, and I was a giggling teenager, but I found out that this guy knew Bear Grylls, and Bear Grylls aside, the person who we was looking at was a big, an explorer in his own right, and had made a life of adventure, was ex-Special Forces, climbed 7 summits, and I insisted, can I come and meet you? And I met him in the infamous tea room here a few months later, and it must have had some sort of impact on him, because shortly after I received an email, and he said, look, I've got an expedition up to the Hardangervidda in Norway, so it's Arctic conditions again. I'm going with ex-Special Forces guys. Would you like to come? And I was jumped at the chance. I think I was 19 at this point, and he hadn't told his teammates that I was going to be joining the team. And I remember we were on a training trip in Scotland, and you can imagine me overhearing all these men sort of grilling him, saying, why did you bring her? She's going to get cold, and things like that. And I remember very specifically him saying, you just wait. And I think it was him, and it always takes someone. You should never underestimate if you really believe in someone, tell them, because that stays with you forever. You might forget it long after you've said something, but it really stayed with me, and I sort of made it my mission to do well, and the expedition was a success. I beat them, pulled heavier pulks than them, and all that. Then that was the start of thinking. I think he said something along the lines of, this could be a career for you. And obviously, you don't just switch a switch and start making money from exploration. It takes quite a long time to...
Still figuring it out, to be honest.
But I had sort of a vision, and I would make it work, and just started getting invited on more expeditions, getting more skills up, doing it as cheap as possible. As you can see here, it started to become a lot of cold places. I
still don't get it.
A lot of cold and high places, mainly because of accessibility, actually. I didn't know how, because I had no skills from the jungle. I didn't know how I was going to get to the jungle properly. And it was the same person who was ex-Special Forces who said, I have an ex-Special Forces mate who lives in the jungle now. If you talk to him nicely, he might allow you to go in. And that was back in 2014. And before we actually go on to the next bit, it was that 2014 expedition. So I'd been doing really cold expeditions up until then. I thought I was properly on the path of being an explorer. Not quite using that term yet. I think I was on the adventurer stage. I didn't feel like I qualified yet.
Yeah.
And I I went out to Guyana in the South America, which is the only English-speaking country, by the way, in South America. And I went out, I did a survival course with him for a few weeks, and then afterwards I went off with 2 Amerindians, the indigenous community there, for on essentially a hunting trip. So they go off, they leave their wives, their families, they go off deep into the jungle for a month, and we would catch as much as we can with bows and arrows, and fishing, smoke it, basically fill the larder. The idea is fill the larders when you get home. And it was on that expedition back in 2014 that I thought, finally in the jungle. I grew up with Jungle Book, obsessed with Tarzan. And I was lying in my hammock on that first night with the 2 guys, and I was thinking, it's really feeling quite proud of myself. And then all of a sudden I hear this noise. And I had been warned just before I'd gone into the interior that the jaguars there and the big cats are going senile. And you kind of think, it's sort of folklore,
Just to scare you a little bit.
Yeah, and big cats, they'll just usually, if you see a big cat, take a picture quickly because it's going to get out of the way. And they said, no, they're going senile, they're taking lively stock as big as cattle, they're taking kids from their villages and things like that. And I thought, okay. And he went to show me the sound that they make, and it's a very particular sound, if you know it. It's almost like a leopard purring sound. And this first night in the jungle with Lionel and Harold, their names, they'd decided, because I was a young sort of female English British person, that they'd decided to respect my privacy and put their hammocks quite a long way away from mine, and which is all well and good. But then I was lying around, it's pitch black in the jungle. You can't even see your hand in front of you because the canopy is so thick. And then I hear this noise, and I'm like, I don't know the jungle enough at this point. It must be a frog. It must be something else. And I hear this noise again, and then my heart is like pounding. And then there's a noise again, and then I'm thinking it is a big cat, and I want to scream, too scared to scream, and they're too far away to hear it. And then this thing is coming closer, it's coming further away, it's coming closer. And the guy who I'd met, who'd warned me about this, had told me, I don't know if anyone knows this, that jaguars, they have like kind of saber-like teeth. They've got really powerful jaws. They're the third biggest cat, after tiger and lion, of course. And unlike a lot of cats, they don't go for the throat with their prey. They come from behind and pierce the skull.
Did you know this before?
Yes.
Right, good, right, okay, you knew this before.
Kill it instantly. You'll often see it on David Attenborough programs where it's dragging big black caiman from the river, so that's strong. And so I'd heard about this, and I'm thinking, okay, I've got nothing to defend myself. My machete is out of my hammock. I've got nothing, my bow and arrow. And I remember that I've got this one, I'm wearing a shirt, I've got this one little penknife, Swiss Army knife, in my shirt pocket. So very, very carefully, while this noise is going on, I don't want to scare a cat, I don't want to look like I'm teasing a cat with my hammock moving. I open up my Swiss Army knife, and where I place it on the back of my head, because it's,
learning,
if it is what I think it is, then I can at least try and prod it and put it off.
Yeah.
Is it going to do anything? Probably not. But and I'm gripping this thing with all the might. This goes on for some time, and then just as the sun's about to come out, light up the canopy floor again. There's a huge kerfuffle beneath my hammock. I'm feeling things underneath my bum, and it goes on for a few seconds, and then it's over, and I don't feel like I'm being watched anymore. Whatever it is, disappears into the bush. And the sun comes up, everything's like lovely in paradise again. And then I go over to Harold and Lionel, and I sort of explain what I heard, try not to act like, a damsel in distress. And then Harold, who's a very silent man, comes over. He simply looks at the floor where I was, and looks up and just nods and goes, "Jaguar." And then that was the first night.
You'll be amazed to find out, though, Jen, that she went back.
Well, what had actually happened was that there was actually an armadillo underneath the hammock. We found the carcass just a few meters away, and it had been, unfortunately, just completely destroyed. And the armadillo was trying to seek shelter underneath my hammock, and sadly met its maker. So after that, I thought I managed my month in the jungle after that, and thought, cold places and high places are more my jam.
Neither of these are appealing to me at all.
And that's where the cold and highs sort of started to take priority for a few years. Yeah.
So I hope what you're getting from this, for anyone who's meeting Lucy for the first time here tonight, is it's that old adage of it takes 10 years to make an overnight success. For anyone who just popped into your imagination from the TV show, I think the message to take home from this is you've been doing this for 10 years and you've been pushing yourselves in very, very, very different environments. Again, both of which I would absolutely hate. But the kind of culmination of this is Secret Amazon, which, like you said, you didn't just suddenly appear in Guyana and say, this looks fun. This was a kind of, again, a multi-year relationship with a very particular, unique country. I mean, for those who haven't seen it and are going to watch it later, can you explain what the purpose and what the mission was?
Yeah, so after I got back, after I'd been doing those cold places for a while, I thought I was doing talks like this, telling everyone to face their fears and, get outside their comfort zones, all the usual stuff. And I thought, maybe I'm being a bit of a hypocrite. Maybe I need to face my fear, which was the jungle. And so I got in touch with my contact, Ian Craddock, out there, who was the same person who introduced me to it all. And this was the year prior to filming this. And he said, you need to come out. There's the Kanuku Mountains. He had previously tried to cross the Kanuku Mountains from south to north, and this area is very legendary. It's got a lot of myths attached to it. There's a lot of unexplored areas on the length of it because of the geography, but also because of Amerindian legends and things. And it's just an incredible place. And so back a year before this, I went to attempt what he had failed at with a group of fantastic guys, and we succeeded out of the odds. And then I got back from that, and I was sitting in Georgetown, the capital of Guyana. And Ian Craddock, he used to, as well as running survival courses and things, used to work as a television fixer.
Unsung heroes of all these things.
Exactly, and it was late at night because he had just been late because he'd been throwing Gordon Ramsay out of a helicopter that day.
For a show, or just because
yeah, I know. Exactly, I question. And I said, well, what's next? And he sort of just leant back and crossed his legs and shrugged and said, oh, you're going to have to cross the whole thing now, aren't you? And by that, he meant the whole of the Kanuku Mountains, east to west, which is pretty much the entire width of Guyana. And my first question to him was, is that even possible? And that's exactly what I was looking for. We don't know. We don't think it is, but...
Yeah, we will find out.
Yeah.
But
then,
sorry.
Well, then sort of Secret Amazon, it was a goer. And then Ian, very, very tragically, passed away. And then it was more of a reason to do this. And then, so there was that personal element, but also the big reason, as well of making this the bigger project that it became, is because half of the area that we were going through is protected. Half of it isn't protected, so of course it's a threat from lots of different reasons of illegal logging, illegal mining. And so we really wanted to showcase its incredible biodiversity and what it had to offer. And that was if we could make it. And then we went out and with these great guys.
Well, we'll come to the biodiversity because that's particularly interesting. But let's start with the human beings. So what I love about this show and your work generally is, and it's definitely at the peak of a trend here, or the front of a trend, is that for travel shows, adventure shows, there's often this idea that you're watching this lone person out there, not realizing there's 8 people behind holding the cameras, carrying the water, and they're doing everything that person's doing, but also carrying the cameras and the kit and all that sort of thing. This is completely different. And I love the fact, obviously, that as we saw them in the trailer, I mean, they thought you were mad to even consider it, but they join you on this journey, and for them, they are just as much invested in doing something completely unique. So do you want to introduce these guys?
Yeah, so there's Max there, Aaron, Mikey, and Vivian. And then also we did have Lionel, who was on my first ever jungle trip, but he had to pull out at a certain stage. But these guys, I mean, they are the real explorers. They're the heroes of the whole story. I was never going to take a crew. Because if you take a crew with TV shows especially, well, one, it doesn't make it authentic because, well, in the way that I was looking for. 2, it made it more dangerous because the more people that are on the ground, the more likely someone's going to step on something or someone's going to get infected. And also, this is like, it was definitely a shared vision that we all had. At the start, they would talk about, oh, this is Lucy's expedition, It's like, no, guys, this is our expedition. And that was quite important from a practical point of view to make sure that they all, believed that this was their expedition as well, which it is. Because as soon as they start thinking it was mine, then it makes, once things get really, really hard, it's very easy to sort of think you want to leave, and everyone needs a role. And these guys, some of them I knew from previous expeditions, so I'd gained a good relationship with them. Like I'm sure everyone knows here, especially in places like Kenya, you can't just say, pick a point on the map anymore and go, I'm going to go from here to here, and just go and do it straight away off the bat. You have to get a lot of permissions, you have to get a lot of permits, whether it's government, elders' blessings, community blessings, protected areas, things like that. So there was a lot of that involved as well to make this happen.
Well, it's lovely as well, because in the show you see these guys, obviously they've kind of gone out on it as a job, but it suddenly becomes something a lot more than that. And also, I mean, they're not exactly, we'll take the guy, I mean, he's not a spring chicken.
He's 52.
Is hard as nails.
He's a great guy. So Aaron had the biggest, I knew Aaron from previous expeditions. Aaron has an interesting story. He gets called a nickname often, and it's kind of seen as the Joker a lot because he's cheeky, and I think it's sort of a front as well. I was going to talk about this later, but I'll talk about it now because it seems important. Like his village has been going through rapid change. So his grandparents used to, the latter bleeders. They used to go to the rubber trees and get rubber from the trees there, and had, were real bush people. And now his village is like retreating from the village, from the forest, and he's sort of lost his way, and he's not that, he didn't have an education, turned to alcohol. And I'd seen him sort of start to transform into this real incredible, confident bushman in the past, but then he would go back to the village and reset and stuff. So I really wanted to give him a chance to come here and
reconnect with an older version of himself.
Exactly, and he did just that, and it was just beautiful to see. Everyone there is so kind and so talented, like so skilled. Max there with the bow. I mean, they can all do it, but like his skill of catching like fish that big from creeks with that bow and arrow is just insane. Like,
well, it is beautiful, and I said I really, really admire the technique of the whole approach that you've taken to it. That it's their story, even more so than yours. And I think the fact is that you're holding the camera most of the time. And again, I mean, we saw in those earlier pictures that obviously you're doing these expeditions, but you're also teaching yourself how to self-film. I mean, usually when I do an expedition, I have a film crew. And yeah, they are a pain in the ass most of the time, but they know how to hold a camera. But this takes particularly when you see what Lucy gets up to. But it's, I guess, what did you learn from this about filmmaking, both on the ground, and then also when you got home, how to tell a story with this is the film crew right here.
Yeah, no, this is, so filmmaking, it was always adventure and filmmaking for me. So adventure and storytelling, which is quite a good combination. But obviously, weirdly, growing up, the adventure side definitely didn't seem like it could be a job. So I thought, okay, well, filmmaking will be more, I was always with a camera from age 10. I studied film and television at university. That seemed like the safe job to take, which is even, not exactly that safe in comparison. I'm sure parents would have liked me to be a doctor or a lawyer or something. I think a lot of people think they can go on adventures or an expedition and they can, as you probably know, I'll make a documentary out of it. But it takes a lot of planning. And so essentially, before I went out there, I had some US channels. So Channel 4 weren't attached to the expedition beforehand. I had some US channels say that they wanted to come and do it, and they wanted to commission it, but they also wanted to send a film crew, but also a male co-host to join me. So I said, I'll go and film it myself. Thank you.
Good.
And, I think filmmaking, weirdly, I wouldn't have been able to say this beforehand, but looking back now, I think it really did, it helped my leadership. So I know so I was the leader of the expedition in terms of what does that mean?
It was your idea.
Yeah. I was my responsibility.
It was your responsibility, yeah.
And I was the navigator and things. And it really helped me because even though we'd had a bad day, one day, every night, I'd get back to the hammock. And I'd be able to kind of, they always say if you're too close to the picture, you can't see the painting. Or maybe it's the other way around. But every time I'd have to think as a viewer, watching this show, what does it look like? And
what on earth just happened?
It gave you a sort of outsider's perspective and a way through so that you don't get too overwhelmed and caught up with it. And also, if anything bad happened, which it did a lot, great story.
Well, I've just touched briefly on this. I mean, what is lovely as well, again, because you're all wearing 7 hats on this expedition, is that you're actually teaching the guys to film as well.
Yeah.
Because my first question when I was watching it with my, filmmaking hat on, I was like, who's holding the camera? All of a sudden, it's the team. They're learning. Obviously, they're finding new skills, and that's absolutely beautiful.
No, Mikey here, I got really lucky. So Mikey showed a real interest in filmmaking from early on. Again, if he hadn't, I didn't ever expect that. And he had a real eye for it. So since then, I sent him a camera back, and he now actually runs his own business in the community. But he was brilliant. And Aaron there, you saw, that was when he'd gone full bushman. So he's living it up.
But you touched on something there about danger. For anyone who has already seen the show, you'll kind of know what I'm coming to. There's obviously quite, in just a 2-part series, you cover an awful lot.
It's quite adrenaline-filled.
It's adrenaline-filled and near-death experiences. I mean, it really was edge-of-sofa stuff. So do you want to just list out some of the things that
Some of the things.
Some of the things, some of the, yeah.
Well, like this picture shows, the jungle, you can't just walk through it. It's essentially on lots of stages of that jungle. As it is, in some areas of the forest in the Aberdares, it's like being in a big bush. And we were covering sometimes only 1 to 2 kilometers a day. And so running out of food rapidly. We weren't seeing sunlight for weeks because we weren't getting into any openings where there were rivers and things. So it was really hard to, one of the biggest dangers is, of course, being wet all the time and getting infected. But the sort of creatures that really like this terrain is something called the Bushmaster snake. So if you haven't seen the show, the Bushmaster snake features quite heavily in it. And if you'd asked my team what they were most afraid of, they would have always said the Bushmaster. And it's got quite a legendary reputation out there for being a very aggressive snake and for having lots of other odd characteristics. And we came across hundreds and hundreds, and they are about 12 foot long. They're really, really camouflage. They coil on the ground, you can't see them. But they also have, and this is up to some debate, but Amerindians swear by it. I swear by it because every time we would hear it, you would see it. So they have this menacing sound, this menacing whistle.
They sing.
They sing, and some people have sort of said that could be a frog, but I'm just going to go with it's the snake because when we heard it, there was always a snake. So even if it's a frog, it's always next to the snake, whatever it was. But it's a terrifying sound, and they also travel in pairs.
Oh, good.
And they can, the Amerindians believe that they follow you because at night it gets quite cold in the mountains especially, and they like to coil underneath your hammock and strike when you least expect it.
Next to the panthers.
Yes.
Yeah.
But and then what other things we got? We got lovely black caiman. So everyone thinks of caiman as being like they're thinking of dwarf caiman. Black caiman are huge things. If you're crossing big rivers where there are black caiman, you don't want to move fast because you don't want to splash because that will just attract them. But then a regular occurrence that we would come across. So you really, really need to know your wasps in the jungle. There's a few different kinds of wasps.
Wow.
Yeah.
Can we come on to this one in particular?
Well,
please go ahead. Yeah.
There's some wasps that you have to really run away from, some wasps that you have to freeze from and let them swarm and sting you a little bit, and then you can sort of get on your way. This wasp, so ignore the tarantula. This wasp is called the tarantula hawk wasp. It's a solo wasp. You'll often see it on the forest floor dragging tarantulas, so it's like a beast of like that big. And it also has the second worst, most painful sting, toxic sting, just after the bullet ant. And what it does with these tarantulas is quite horrifying. It nosedives the tarantula, stings it in between its legs, which paralyzes the tarantula. Then what it does is, as it's doing here, is it drags it back to its burrow, and then it injects or lays an egg inside the tarantula. The tarantula, the egg then starts to eat the tarantula inside out and leaves the internal organs, the vital internal organs, so that it stays alive for as long as possible, and so it's fresh. And then, then it becomes a wasp itself. So, I mean, it's quite incredible, but also they say that they're pretty docile to humans, so they say that they won't bother you that much. But there was one day that we were having a particularly bad day, and then it got me right in the eye. That's when, I'm quite an optimistic person normally, and that's when you really have to dig deep to keep that trait.
Yeah, I mean, I've never ever felt sorry for a tarantula before. But I don't know who I feel more sorry for, you or that tarantula, because I know what's coming.
Exactly. Yeah, it's me. It's not having a good time.
But I must say, I liked in the film something that you pointed out, which we often don't when you're stomping through and kind of glorifying in what you could be stung by or bitten by. Is there is a part in the film where you're genuinely cut up about killing a snake?
Yes.
Because, and I think rightly so, because it made me stop and check, because often you see, these things are trying to attack us, and actually you acknowledge quite importantly that you're the one that is stomping through their home very temporarily.
Absolutely.
And I think you took the sting very graciously.
Oh, well, thank you. I have to say that if it was right here and it came and stung me on the eye right now, I would burst into tears on the floor. But there's something, you'll know this, that there's something when you're actually out in the environment and there's no choice but to be that version of yourself, you just crack on, don't you?
Yeah, well, maybe it's that, like you say, proving yourself to Bear Grylls, learning early. But let's get this off. Obviously, I mean, I love these. I wanted to feature these guys because obviously I'm partial to wild boar, I won't lie. And I think now I can see that these guys are an even match. So just explain, I mean, I did not expect to see them in the jungle of Ghana. Who are these guys?
Yeah, so this is, I think this is the white-lipped peccary, that these ones don't have tusks on. But so Ian Craddock, the jungle survival ex-special forces guy, you know, when you say, what is he afraid? He's like, oh no, I'm not afraid of the bushmaster, I'm not afraid of the jaguars, I'm afraid of, it's the peccary you want to worry about. And I was always like, oh, really?
Just a pig. Yeah.
But these things travel in huge numbers through the forest. Even the bushmasters and the jaguars are afraid of them. And you'll hear them coming because in the distance you'll hear the teeth grinding. And they're in their hundreds, and you hear their teeth grinding, the babies making noises. And what they do is the males all go on the outside, and then the females and the young are inside. And the only thing you can do to get away from them, because nothing's stopping them, is climb a tree.
Well, there's a little clip from the show, which
Peccary are a wild pig. In this wilderness, it's the white-lipped peccary that roam. And they travel in herds of up to 500 and can become very defensive. You don't want to come across them.
I hear them just now. Yeah.
Peccary.
Peccary.
How many?
A lot. There's a lot of them.
A lot of peccaries. So peccaries are super dangerous. They take out anything in their path. And we have to climb a tree if they come. Oh, right.
200 meters far from them.
They're only a couple hundred meters away. That's a lot of them.
So tree climbing does come in handy. Keep it up.
without the camera.
Yeah.
But we're coming to the end of this Amazonian story, but I think bring us back to what I want to talk about with Rhino Ark and this idea of the cohabitation of human and nature. And I want to do so with this picture. This is real cohabitation of nature and humanity. Do you want to explain what that is?
So that's very much like a botfly. They call them, Amerindian guys call it a mosquito worm. So in the jungle, it's very, very important to have good discipline and good wet and dry routine. So you only take 2 pairs of clothes on expedition. We were out there for months, and just 2 pairs of clothes. One is your day clothes, and of course your day clothes get very wet and manky and horrible and smelly. And every day, no matter what, even though the maps we were using were 50 years old and very, very inaccurate, Google Maps doesn't work out there, unfortunately. But they were taken by a Canadian pilot who took pictures and drew what he could see. So you can imagine in the jungle, it's quite hard to go by. But I'm always trying to look for some sort of water source, because even if it's a muddy puddle, you want to scrub yourself clean. But poor Mikey was quite self-conscious, and he wasn't washing maybe as much as he should have done. And as a result, so he would go past these, and they would get into his paws and lay eggs in him. This one was probably about 3 weeks old, and every night it comes up for air, so it pokes through the skin. And he was saying, I've got something in my arm that I think is sore. And we realized quite early on and suffocate it, squeeze it out. And he actually ended up with 5 of these, poor guy. But, so it's important to wash in the jungle. Then after you wash, you get into your dry stuff. And that's the only luxury you have, really.
I hope you made a note of that one. But, I mean, it's an extraordinary journey, and I really, really, please go home and watch it. We've only given you some of the highlights of the misery that these guys endured for what's an extraordinary piece of exploration history. So, the end, 50 days. I can kind of guess how you might have felt here, but how did you feel?
Yeah, 50 days. It was 50 days, 400 kilometers, which is like 253 miles, which in the jungle, going at maybe 2 or 3 kilometers up and down. It's right. It was, yeah, I think it's a mixture of emotions, as you know, when you do these expeditions. You have, in one sense, you've got absolute euphoria, on top of the world feeling, but on the other hand, you've got hesitation because you've
got to go back to the real world.
Real world, which is the real world is the question. But you build up such a bond with with whoever you're with. It's all stripped back when you're out in the wild, isn't it? Or it can just take having a conversation around a campfire. Real raw relationships, which I think we're so lacking now in modern day. And you get to, there's this huge feeling of fulfillment. You're tackling problems in the moment. You're having to overcome it. And it's just huge, empowering and fulfilling. But saying that, it felt pretty good to have a shower.
But it wasn't just about testing your own metal, there was a point to this and there was a legacy to it.
Yeah, so a few months ago, so the whole point obviously was raising awareness of the area and really putting pressure on the government. Guyana is going through quite a big transition at the moment. Was it in 2019, I think it was, discovered oil.
This is never a good thing.
No, never a good thing, but if it's used right and if they have a vision for the future, it's, But I was recently with the President Ali, who's, I was having dinner with him recently and managed to get real to the crux of it. And he said something very, very positive. And he said, so they currently have 8% protected area in Guyana. And he's promised that he's just announced he's going to be making it to 30% by 2030.
Brilliant.
And so that's, for me, that's a really good step forward with that.
Fantastic. No, real legacy and one hell of a show. So plugging that one more time, go and watch it. But obviously another legacy of doing this is that the wonderful guys at Rhino Ark wrote to you and said, would you come and bring some of this skill set to East Africa and about the work we're doing? And so I think 2023?
2023, we're headed out there.
Headed out.
Yeah.
So where are we here?
I can't remember exactly where I was there, but I was on part of the fence that was being built. It was a whirlwind trip, and I feel very, very fortunate to have got to experience this. As John I'm sure a lot of people know all about, far more than I know about Rhino Ark, I'm sure, but the fence that the guys do is just so important. And I was always, under the misconception that Rhino Ark maybe was just about rhinos, how wrong I was, of course. And this fence, I was blown away by, who here doesn't know too much about Rhino Ark, or does everyone? Okay, good. There are some people who I can educate here, and if I say things drastically wrong, then please tell me. I don't want to trip up. But electric fence. It in a way, it sounds okay. Well, we're protecting the animals from getting out, and it's so much more than that. It's about preventing wildlife-human conflict. The animals are incredibly dangerous to, obviously, humans.
Well, let's come on to these guys.
Yeah,
not just rhinos, I think, is the message.
Definitely. There's a much, much bigger picture. I mean, it's all about how everything's connected, isn't it? And I think I previously maybe underestimated elephants. How I was incredibly wrong. Elephants are always seen as like these gentle giants, aren't they? And really intelligent gentle giants, but their intelligence also makes them pretty lethal, and they can get quite angry. And I'm sure, we've talked about the human-wildlife conflict. One story in particular that was showing on the video. Yeah.
Okay, you ready for this? Here is a youngish man, Salim.
Yeah.
He's got a hell of a story.
He has.
Do you want to tell a little bit?
Yeah, no, I think one of the reasons that I was so impressed with the electric fence and things is obviously when you don't have an electric fence, wildlife are roaming free and going on crops and coming into people's land. And I think a lot of people in here have met Salim. But for those of you who don't know his story, he was one early morning was leaving his house with I think his grandchild or child, taking him to school, and an elephant came about them and started charging them. And the child managed to keep running to the house. Salim tripped up and fell and then the elephant came and did quite some damage.
This is what happens when you don't manage.
Yeah, I mean, you can see multiple things happen here. I think he's missing a collarbone and sort of really went through some danger, but incredibly still smiling. And now that the Rhino Ark fence exists, he said to me that he likes to wave at the elephants and say, "I love you, elephants."
He didn't lose his sense of humour.
He did.
But no, I mean, there is a serious point to this. Obviously, this is obviously, human-wildlife conferences, as we populate and expand ever more so, this is becoming a reality on both sides. And I think the work that Rhino Ark UK and Rhino Ark are doing is protecting people like Salim, but also the wildlife as well. But it's obviously there are also not just Salim hanging around down there. There's whole communities, there's schools, there's kids, there's whole generations who have to be educated about the dangers and the wonderfulness of.
Definitely, and also, the school, the where the fence is, didn't used to be. There's that boundary of where the forest begins and where humans are around. And previously, there's so many schools that were in danger. But now, right next to the fence, they can be safe. But they're also being, as I understand it, being educated in conservation as a result of Rhino Ark. And I mean, that for me is everything, because you don't care about something that you don't know about. And so really getting to that at that early stage, I think there's so much to learn from that. I wish that our governments here would do stuff that was that forward, long-term thinking, because I really think that's a huge important thing to be doing.
And I think something that you obviously living in Secret Amazon, and you've definitely seen the work down there, is you're part of this much bigger system. I quite love this photo, but obviously elephants, rhinos, people, getting that balance right has much broader benefits than just saving the life of an individual human or an individual animal.
Yeah, no, I mean, protecting these wildernesses is obviously, it's not just an ego massager to say, we've got wild places still. We need these wild places more than ever. The Aberdares, I think, supply 80% of the water for Nairobi. So if they go, and it's a huge problem. I think we really need to change the narrative on how we talk about nature as a whole. We live in a very disconnected world now, and some people have never even left their village or left their city. And so the idea of this other world and natural world feels so far removed. But we need to remember that we are nature. In the jungle, you really, or on any big extreme environment, you realize just how small you are, but also just how impactful. Yes, we are small as individuals, but there's 8 billion of us. We can do a lot of damage if we want, but we can also do a lot of good. And we need to recognize that it is happening right now, the damage. It isn't, when we talk about climate change, biodiversity loss, it isn't our grandchildren's problem. It is our problem right now. And I've seen it. I've been going to the Arctic for 14 years, every year pretty much. And the changes are really obvious now. And it's heartbreaking, because as Rhino Ark have proved, and as Kenya has proved, when I went out there, I was just almost frustrated, because the answer is there. We have the answer. And we just need to come together, put our heads together and figure out, because we can make it work, and we can make who wouldn't want that life where everything is living in harmony?
Well, I think, thank you for the work that you're doing. And I think we often, when we do talks like this, we end up sort of pondering what the meaning of exploration is when everything's been explored, when Google Maps exists, and this idea that there's nothing new to conquer, there's nothing new to see. I think what you're doing here is brilliant, which is a particular place in a particular time, and bringing the story home to the rest of us who don't have the sort of completely bulletproof bravery that you have demonstrated after the last 10, 14 years. So before we go to questions, can I have a huge round of applause for Lucy Shepherd?